Good Wednesday morning, everyone, and welcome to part 4 of the Exorcism of Our Lady of Sorrows, which is chapter 13 in my book, Low Magic. It's all in your head. You just have no idea how big your head is. Continuing from yesterday, I had just evoked the spirit slug in my office, home office, and as soon as I was satisfied that the spirit was in the triangle, I forced it to agree to stay in the triangle until I called it again. And it agreed it would. And the triangle itself, the sigil of the spirit that was in the triangle itself, was on a small yellow post-it pad. My magical circle was a simple rope, silken rope cord, very, very thin silk cord. And I was to remain in the circle, and the spirit was to remain in the triangle as all of it moved to the location of Our Lady of Sorrows High School in another city. I'd never done this before. But after the ceremony was over, I told the spirit, you will remain in the triangle and I'll visit you again soon. Do you understand? I understand. Swear it. Then, as much as a talking bird can, it cleared its throat and said, I swear I will remain in the triangle. Then, without further conversation or ceremony, I stood up within the circle, removed my yarmulke and stole, stripped off my robe. Then I carefully gathered around me the silken cord of my circle, wrapped it tightly around my naked body, and tied it securely in place. I would not take off the medallion with the spirit sigil that linked me to the spirit, or leave this circle until the exorcism was accomplished. Part 4. The interview with Sister Martha begins with an epigram from The Last Temptation of Christ by Nikos Kazantzakis. Kazantzakis. It's rolling off my tongue now. Nikos Kazantzakis. Last Temptation of Christ. Oh, here's the quote. I digress there for a second. The quote is, the doors of heaven and hell are adjacent and identical. I quickly dressed, concealing my silken magic circle and medallion under a clean white shirt and black tie. I jotted down a few notes in my magical diary, including a hastily composed oath. I threw it in my briefcase along with a few other items necessary for traveling exorcisms. My almond wand, wrapped in its red satin bag. My yarmulke. My bishop's stole. A vial of oil of abramelin, the yellow post-it notepad with the sigil of slug permanently trapped in its own little triangle, a flask of holy water. See chapter 6. Basically, as a consecrated bishop, I can make my own holy water. as we say. All I have to do is bless it myself, and there you go. But anyway, 2 fresh votive candles and a glass candle holder, 2 cigarette lighters, 6 sprigs of rosemary clipped from our backyard herb garden, and the lid to a medium-sized saucepan. All of that I packed up in my briefcase. Mark arrived to pick me up, and soon the DuQuette brothers' traveling exorcist show was on the road to Our Lady of Sorrows High School. It was early in the evening, and the campus was closed when we pulled up to the towering Spanish wrought iron gate. Mark pushed the security button and announced our presence to the voice in the black box. Just as if in a proper Gothic horror movie, the gates groaned open and we drove through. Sister Martha stood outside the door on the side of the main building and indicated where we should park. She was a rather small woman in her mid-40s, wearing a black silk skirt and a simple gray suit jacket over a white blouse. I was disappointed that she was not decked out in full medieval drag. Still, if I were asked to pick out the nun in the room full of women, she would have been my choice. After introductions, Sister Martha gave us a brief tour of the building, pointing out the location of various supernatural manifestations as we went along. We spent several minutes in the classroom that witnessed the death of young Sister Catherine, and the tour ended in the faculty lounge and the administrative staff area. The lounge seemed innocuous enough, but I was immediately disturbed by the layout of the staff area, which was reminiscent of the nightmarish set designs of early German expressionist films. It was an asymmetrical and chaotic maze of misshapen cubicles, completely devoid of clean right angles or unobstructed lines of sight. The office of the vice principal was the only enclosed office. Its large windows provided a perfect overview of the panorama of chaos. I am by no means a feng shui expert, but I couldn't help but think this entire area was surely a serious impediment to any kind of energy flow. A severe case of qi constipation, if I ever saw one. The whole scene would have been comical had it not been so overpoweringly claustrophobic and suffocating. The area was accessible only by one door that opened onto the hallway. Just standing there made me gasp for air and want to run away. But it was here that Sister Martha lingered as she related the details of the specific tragedies and misfortunes that had recently befallen the poor souls who labored for their daily bread in that warped little trapezoidal hell. She had, in fact, prepared a one-sheet dossier complete with name, age, picture, job title, and the sad details of each victim's particular affliction, accident, or tragedy, which she clipped to the wall, to the hanging inbox attached outside each victim's door or cubicle. For instance, the name of the person, 34, accountant, and then her picture. fractured arm while recovering from breast surgery. Office formerly occupied by another name, who perished with baby in car fire. Mark and I were impressed. Before she left us to do her work, for us to do our work, she sat down for a few minutes in her office to chat. She told us she'd been busy all afternoon arranging the school's memorial service for Sister Catherine. She was visibly upset and very tired. She told us we would have access to the entire building up to 6 a.m., when people would start arriving for the next school day. There would be only one other person in the building during the night, Larry, the IT man, who did his computer duties at night. She rang Larry in his office and asked him to please come to her office. When he appeared, Sister Martha introduced him to Mark and me and told him we would be in the building for several hours during the night doing, quote, some work, unquote, for her, adding that we had her permission to go anywhere in the building and that he was not to disturb us. Larry was a gaunt man, perhaps 40 years old, in jeans and a dark gray t-shirt. He seemed a bit high-strung, and I got the clear impression that he viewed us with suspicion. "What kind of work?" Larry asked nervously. "Nothing at all to do with your computers, Larry. They won't be disturbing you," Sister Martha quickly interjected before either Mark or I could respond. Larry didn't seem satisfied with Sister Martha's answer. He looked at Mark and me as if he hoped we would offer more information. When none was forthcoming, he stammered, "Well, I'll be backing up the system all night, so if they want to look at—" "They'll not be working with computers, Larry," said Sister Martha with a tinge of irritation in her voice. I quickly decided I didn't like Larry. When he disappeared, Sister Martha told us how to lock the building, gave us a security code to open the gate. She then thanked us again for coming and presented us with a check. A very generous figure, we thought, for such an intangible service. And said she'd be leaving us to do our work. She opened her handbag and was fishing for her car keys when her cell phone rang. She plucked it from her purse, flipped it open, and answered. "Yes, dear, how are you doing?" She obviously knew the caller. Then, after a long moment of silence, Sister Martha sat down and sighed. "Oh dear, when? Is anyone with you?" She listened silently for a couple of minutes before saying, "We're all praying for you, dear. Try to get some rest. I'll see you tomorrow." She flipped her phone shut and glared blankly at Mark and me. That was Sister Catherine's mother. Her husband, Catherine's father, was devastated by her death. He collapsed and died about a half an hour ago. For an uncomfortably long moment, it seemed that Sister Martha was going to say something. She didn't. She picked up her purse and keys and simply said, "I'll let you get started now." Now that's the end of that pretty short little section of part 4 of this story. I'm debating whether I should. I'm going to start a little of part 5, if you don't mind. Part 5, at least the first section of part 5. The Exorcism. Little epigram is a quote from the movie The Exorcist.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
That's for Reagan, the possessee. Mark and I were in a pretty somber mood after Sister Martha left. Mark said he'd like to systematically go through the building as he had done previously, and when he was finished would wait for me in the faculty lounge. I told him I would more or less follow in his wake. We conferred for a few minutes in the hallway as we confirmed our respective routes through the school. The faculty lounge would be our base camp and final meeting place. We agreed we would both start there. I waited in the hallway while Mark did his thing. Now remember that Mark was a Reiki practitioner. When he was done, he went on his way, and I re-entered the lounge and prepared myself for the magical marathon to come. I sat down in the most comfortable chair in the room and put my briefcase on my lap. I closed my eyes and took a couple of deep breaths and repeated my Ganesha banishing invocation, mantra, and visualization. I then reluctantly got out of my comfy chair, loosened my tie, unbuttoned the collar of my shirt, fished out the medallion bearing the image of the pentagram and the sigil of Slug. I arranged it so it neatly hung over my tie. I then rebuttoned my collar, slid the knot of my tie trimly against my neck. For some reason, I felt it vitally important for me to appear as professional as possible. I opened my briefcase and again anointed my head with a tiny dab of oil of Abramelin, popped on my yarmulke, clipped my juror's badge hexagram to my shirt pocket, and put on my bishop's stole. For the first time, I noticed the life-size and obscenely gruesome crucifix hanging on the wall near the bulletin board. How could I have missed that? I moved closer to have a better look. Surprisingly, my dark cynicism regarding the church and Christianity in general disappeared, and for a moment, I saw the great G, that's who I invoke in my invocations, the big whatever the totality of everything is. For a moment I saw the great G in that ghastly symbol. I looked into the helpless eyes of God and uttered this 33-word oath. I, Tau Lamed, swear by everything I hold sacred that I will not leave this building until I have exorcised the spirit that torments this school and those who labor and study here. I lit the small votive candle and turned off all the other lights in the room. I then removed my wand from its bag and proceeded to banish, purify, consecrate, and seal the room in the following manner. With the wand, I performed the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. With the wand, I performed the lesser banishing ritual of the hexagram. I purified the room by sprinkling the 4 quarters with holy water and announced, This room is purified with water. I consecrated the room by approaching the four quarters with the votive candle in hand. With it, I drew an equal-armed cross in the air at each quarter and announced, "This room is consecrated with fire." I fumigated the room by approaching the four quarters with burning rosemary, which I kept igniting from the flame of the votive candle that I carried from quarter to quarter on the lid of the saucepan, which also served as my ashtray. Returning to the center of the room, I placed the forefinger of my right hand against my lips and took a deep breath. I then forcefully expelled my breath and swept my hand down and in front of me and to the side and back of my body as I shouted, "Apopantos kakodaimenos," Greek for away or behind me, evil spirits. Upon leaving the newly banished, purified, and consecrated area, I sealed the room by dabbing oil of abramelin on my fingertip and painting a pentagram upon the inside of the door and 3 Tau crosses on the outside of the door, one each on the left, right, and upper doorpost. As I drew the Tau crosses, I whispered the words, "In nomine Babylon, Amen. Restriction unto Corona zone." For the next 2.5 hours, I systematically repeated these 7 steps in every room and hallway of the building. Well, every room of the building I could access. The second to the last area I cleared in this manner was Sister Martha's office and its adjoining bathroom. I remember thinking she must be a truly good person. Her office was a sane and calm oasis in an otherwise troubled and disturbing universe. I wanted to linger there, but it was getting late, and I knew the most difficult part of the evening was still ahead of me. I sealed Sister Martha's office with three sweet cinnamon-scented crosses and crossed the hallway to descend into the feng shui hell of the administrative staff area. The place seemed even more terrible than it had just a few short hours ago. I performed the full 7-part ritual inside each tiny cubicle, pausing to read each dossier. It was very difficult and a little dangerous wending my way by candlelight through the maze of desks and chairs. After over an hour, the smoke from the burning rosemary became so thick in the enclosed area that I feared it would set off the smoke alarm system. Mercifully, it did not. I came at last to the semi-private office of the vice principal. Now, if you can just sort of picture what has happened. Remember, my idea of how to go about exercising a whole school building was triggered by my visual memory of old Mr. Jacobs, the school janitor, sweeping the school gymnasium by starting in each corner of the gymnasium and sweeping all of the refuse and the dirt and dust into the center of the gymnasium, and then sweeping it up in sweeping the whole pile up into one stroke of his broom into his dustpan. And it was like I banished every room in the school except the last one. So in other words, I was concentrating everything into one spot, and that's where I would work with it, okay? I came at last to the semi-private office, the vice principal. Here I would resume the evocation that I had put on ice so many hours ago back home. Like old Mr. Jacobs, the janitor in my vision, I had swept the filth of the entire building into one neat pile. I chose this area for the final showdown for several reasons. First, it had the most room to work. Second, all of its walls, including the one with the door and window that opened to the common area, reached from floor to ceiling. It seemed like the nerve center of the problem, and the perfect venue to trap a demon. Lastly, I have to confess I took perverse pleasure in remembering how in my rambunctious school days I had confronted several other obnoxious demons in a high school vice principal's office. That's where I'll end today. We'll start tomorrow with the showdown. And until then, for those of you who were concerned about my eye thing yesterday, so was I. But since then, I've had no recurrence. So knock on banker's boxes. I hope that's okay. At least I got it through today. So until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. In nomine Babylon, restriction into Corona zone.